Under the lights of the Tennis and Water Sports Palace in Dushanbe, Tajikistan, this was never meant to be just another fight on the IBA.PRO calendar. This was a collision of ideologies, a meeting point between two men who approach violence in the ring from opposite ends of the boxing spectrum. Jose Miguel Borrego, the tattooed pressure fighter from Aguascalientes, Mexico, entered the ring carrying more than just a 26-fight professional record. He carried expectation that when he steps forward, the fight follows him. Expectation that ribs will be tested, lungs will burn, and resistance will eventually fold. Borrego is not reckless. He is methodical in destruction, a fighter who believes the body is the gateway to the soul. Across from him stood Vadim Musaev, the Russian technician, a 2021 World Championship silver medalist whose reputation had been built on angles, timing, and emotional restraint. Musaev's undefeated professional record was not forged in chaos, but in control. His weapons were not hooks thrown in bunches, but decisions made in milliseconds, when to step left, when to pivot, when to touch and disappear. From the opening bell, the contrast was immediate. Musaev circled lightly, flicking a jab that wasn't meant to hurt, but to interrupt. Borrego advanced deliberately, elbows tight, chin tucked, absorbing information rather than chasing impact. Every step Borrego took forward was an investment. Every jab Musaev landed, a withdrawal. The early rounds were a quiet chess match, disguised as movement. Musaev scored cleanly, touching Borrego with straight shots and sliding off the line, refusing to be cornered. Borrego meanwhile showed no urgency, content to let Musaev move, content to let the fight breathe, because pressure fighters understand something others don't. Exhaustion doesn't show up in round one. It arrives later, uninvited. As the first round closed, there were no dramatic moments, no visible damage, but the story had already begun writing itself. Musaev was winning the optics, but Borrego was winning the geography, slowly shrinking the available space. By round two, the Mexican began testing the body, sneaking hooks under the elbow, letting Musaev feel the cost of movement. Musaev answered with accuracy, but not authority. The punches landed, yet Borrego kept stepping forward, eyes locked, breathing steady. This wasn't a fight about dominance, it was about patience, and as the bell rang again, it became clear that this would not be decided quickly. It would be decided slowly, through attrition, through discipline, through who could remain themselves the longest under pressure. By the third and fourth rounds, the tempo shifted from observation to confrontation, and the fight began to reveal its true nature. Borrego started doing what he does best, turning movement into labor. Each time Musaev slid laterally, Borrego followed, not recklessly, but intelligently, cutting angles instead of chasing shadows. The bodywork intensified, hooks digging into the ribs, forcing Musaev to breathe with intention, rather than comfort. Musaev continued to score with straight shots, but something subtle was changing. His movement, once effortless, began to require thought. Borrego's pressure was not explosive, but cumulative, like water dripping on stone. In the fourth round, Musaev was forced to clinch for the first time, a small but meaningful concession. Clinching is not weakness, but it is acknowledgement that space is no longer guaranteed. Borrego sensed it. His output increased, not wildly, but confidently. He was no longer just absorbing Musaev's offense. He was answering it immediately, countering body shots with body shots, testing the Russian's willingness to trade. Musaev responded with sharp combinations, planting his feet briefly to reassert control, but every time he did, Borrego was there, ready to take something, to give something. This was where the mental battle intensified. Musaev knew judges could misinterpret excessive movement as retreat if not punctuated with authority. Borrego knew that every second Musaev spent thinking about optics was a second closer to fatigue. Round 5 became the first true swing round of the fight. Musaev still landed cleanly, but the snap on his punches dulled. Borrego's presence grew heavier, his body shots more frequent, his confidence unmistakable. It wasn't dominance, it was momentum, the kind that creeps rather than explodes. As the round ended, Musaev returned to his corner breathing heavier than before, while Borrego stood calmly, listening to his corner's calls of momento, momento, understanding that the fight was beginning to tilt. The question, hanging over the ring, was simple yet ominous. Could Musaev maintain precision under sustained pressure for 10 rounds, or would Borrego's persistence eventually force mistakes? This was no longer about who was the better boxer. It was about who could impose their reality on the other without losing themselves in the process. The 6th round answered one question and posed another. Musaev emerged revitalized, as if the minute on the stool had reset his internal clock. His footwork sharpened, his jab regained its sting, and his combinations flowed with renewed confidence. For a moment, it looked as if the pendulum had swung back entirely. Musaev glided, pivoted, and touched Borrego with clean shots that snapped his head back just enough to remind everyone why he was unbeaten. But Borrego is not a fighter who disappears under adversity. He absorbed the offense and continued forward, and midway through the round, he found his moment. A heavy left landed near the ropes, not a knockdown blow, but a statement. Musaev's legs stiffened briefly, his movement slowed, and Borrego pounced, unloading to the body with the intent of testing not just endurance, but resolve. This was the heart of the fight, not flashy, not dramatic, but brutally honest. Musaev answered back, refusing to wilt, trading in the pocket when necessary, showing that he was not merely a mover, but a competitor. By the 7th round, fatigue began to creep into the visuals. Musaev's legs looked heavier, his exit slower. Borrego, sensing vulnerability, increased his pressure, cutting the ring more effectively, forcing exchanges. A clean hook from Musaev was met with defiance. Borrego tapped his chin, signaling not bravado, but belief. This was psychological warfare now. Musaev, for all his skill, was being asked questions that technique alone could not answer. Could he maintain clarity when his body was tired? Could he continue to think when pain demanded reaction? The 7th round ended with Borrego surging, and for the first time, it felt like the fight might be slipping away from the technician. Momentum is a fragile thing in boxing. And as the crowd buzzed, the balance teetered on the edge of chaos. Rounds 8 and 9 transformed the contest from a physical battle into a mental marathon. Musaev, aware that the fight was tightening, made adjustments that only seasoned fighters can. He varied his rhythm, doubled the jab, and used feints not to land punches, but to freeze Borrego just long enough to escape danger. Borrego continued his body assault, digging hooks, trying to sap what little energy remained in Musaev's legs. The exchanges were fierce, honest, and exhausting. Neither man dominated. Both endured. In the 8th, Musaev landed a sharp combination that drew a reaction from Borrego, only for the Mexican to smile and tap his chin once more, daring him to try again. It was a moment that encapsulated the fight. Skill versus will. Precision versus persistence. The 9th round saw Musaev regain composure, moving with renewed purpose, landing clean shots and avoiding extended exchanges. Borrego pressed harder, swinging with urgency, knowing that time was slipping away. His body shots landed, but Musaev's movement mitigated their impact. The Russian dipped, pivoted, and answered with sharp counters, refusing to be trapped. As the bell rang to end the 9th, the fight hung in the balance. Both men had moments. Both had arguments. The judges' scorecards could have leaned either way. It all came down to the final 3 minutes. The 10th round was where champions reveal themselves, and Musaev understood the assignment. He came out active, assertive, landing combinations early to establish control. Borrego pressed forward with everything he had left, swinging with intent, knowing that only decisive moments could swing the fight. Musaev's movement was sharp, his timing precise. He touched Borrego repeatedly, stealing seconds, stealing moments, stealing momentum. Borrego landed a heavy hook that snapped Musaev's head, but it wasn't enough to halt the Russian's rhythm. The final exchanges were frantic, both men throwing, both men refusing to yield. When the bell finally rang, there was no celebration, only exhaustion and mutual respect. 10 rounds had passed, without a knockdown, without controversy, without compromise. When the decision was announced, unanimous for Vadim Musaev, it felt earned rather than stolen. Borrego had applied relentless pressure, tested endurance, and forced adaptation, but Musaev had answered every question with composure and intelligence. This fight was not about perfection, it was about survival. And in the end, the fighter who could think while tired, who could move while hurt, who could remain himself under fire, walked away with the titles. This was IBA.PRO boxing at its finest. 2 men, 2 styles, 1 truth. Victory belongs to the one who lasts.